Bonjour, Kakina.
All right, we kind of got a packed hour here. So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to get started. We'll just get right into it. Hamataki yapi, yushki anwenchi and kapi chante washtea na pechi uzapi he. It's really great to see you today, my relatives. I greet you all with a warm heart and a handshake. My name is Kateri Tuttle, and welcome to Food Sovereignty 101, a conversation between natives and Dream of Wild Health. As I said, my name is Kateri Tuttle. I was born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I am Santee and Sisseton Wahpeton, Dakota. The Twin Cities, or Minneapolis and St. Paul, are the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. At this time, I invite you all to let us know who you are, where you are joining from, and to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Indigenous people where you are, if you know. As we keep those coming in, I'd like to take a second to review audience participation guidelines. If at any point you can't hear one of the presenters or need something clarified, please let us know in the chat. Please feel free to leave comments and your thoughts throughout the panel in the chat as well. We will be holding a 15-minute Q&A at the end, so please hold all direct questions for panelists until that time. Please note also that we are recording this presentation, and we can email and will email you the recording later this week. Also, make sure to keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. As I mentioned, I am the program coordinator for the Indigenous Food Network. The Indigenous Food Network aims to increase access to healthy Indigenous foods and increase consumption of healthy Indigenous foods. It also provides an opportunity for Native-led organizations in the Twin Cities to work together to rebuild a sovereign food system by identifying and leveraging community assets. Healthy Indigenous foods and lifeways, collaboration, and community are at the heart of what I do and what we do at the IFN. Padamayaye, or thanks to all of our partners for all of your work, all the work that you do, and for your continued participation and support of the IFN. If anyone would like more information about the IFN, please feel free to message me, Kateri, at dreamofwildhealth.org. You can also go to our Dream of Wild Health site page and find more information under the Indigenous Food Network's program page. The IFN is housed within Dream of Wild Health. Dream of Wild Health is a nonprofit organization with an office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and a 30-acre organic farm in Hugo, Minnesota. Surrounded by plants and medicines grown from the seeds of our ancestors, we work to empower Native American people to reclaim their physical, spiritual, and mental health. Our relationship with traditional foods, lifeways, and medicines has only grown closer during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have expanded our efforts to increase food access. At Dream of Wild Health, we grow seeds and we grow leaders. If anyone has any questions about Dream of Wild Health youth programming, open positions, or anything else, please feel free to message us at info@dreamofwildhealth.org. If anybody has any questions about our current open positions, I think Tyra can post the positions that are open in the chat right now as well. Last but certainly not least, our final collaborator for today's panel is NATIFS. North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems, also known as NATIFS, was founded by James Beard Award winners, the Sioux Chef. NATIFS is dedicated to addressing the economic and health crisis affecting Native communities by reestablishing Native foodways. In August of 2020, NATIFS opened the Indigenous Food Lab at the Midtown Global Market. The Indigenous Food Lab has a production and training kitchen, which is being used to serve the tribal communities throughout the region. During the pandemic, the Indigenous Food Lab has been serving tens of thousands of meals to Native communities to provide hunger relief and to enable tribal elders to shelter in place. If anyone would like more information on NATIFS or would like to volunteer at the Indigenous Food Lab, we'll post that information in the chat right now as well. Nina Wopita, or much gratitude to NATIFS for all your work and the time you have provided for us to come together for a collaborative like this. I would also like to take a quick sec right now to thank Liz Collin, NATIFS Indigenous Education Coordinator, and Tyra Payer, Dream of Wild Health Communications Coordinator, for all of their work on this event. They have been working really hard to promote this in tandem, and they've done a really great job. Thanks, Liz and Tyra. I will be introducing the panelists very soon, but I'll just say a quick few words about how this all came together. This all started a few months ago when I started volunteering at the Indigenous Food Lab. I met Armando and we started talking about programming and ways to collaborate. I then invited Hope to volunteer, and the rest is history. We are also super excited to have Felicia here as well. She has come through Dream of Wild Health programming and will be adding her perspective on this discussion as well. So the first person I would like to introduce is Felicia Galvan. Felicia Galvan is an enrolled member of the White Earth Nation of Minnesota. Her food sovereignty journey started at Dream of Wild Health as a garden warrior and as a youth leader. There she grew to love veggies and community with the help of the farm and elders. During the summer of 2020, she found herself back on Dream of Wild Health soil as a seasonal farmer. Felicia now gathers research on how to best care for seeds with the University Seed Library. She will graduate in May 2021 from the University of Minnesota Morris for anthropology and Spanish. As a current semi-finalist for the Fulbright Award, Felicia is hoping to do research about Indigenous food sovereignty in Peru post-graduation. She's also very excited to share her experiences, to learn from other food advocates, and to be a role model for future generations. Thanks for joining us, Felicia. The next person I'd like to introduce is Armando Medinaceli. Armando Medinaceli, PhD, is a Bolivian ethnobiologist with extensive experience collaborating with Indigenous peoples in Bolivia, Mexico, Guatemala, as well as teaching at undergraduate and graduate levels in the United States and Bolivia. He has over 15 years of experience working in ethnobiology, Indigenous foodways and food sovereignty, biocultural diversity, sustainability, climate change, community conservation, collaborative video, and more. Through his collaborative approach to research, his experience as a professor has led research and programs with an educational focus, always highlighting the EMIC, or local perspectives, and supporting the self-determination of Indigenous communities. As part of his commitment to ethically collaborate with Indigenous people, he serves as co-coordinator for the Latin American Society of Biology's Ethics Committee, and as a member of the Society of Ethnobiology's Ethics and Advocacy Committee. As the Indigenous Education Director at NATIFS, he works on the design, coordination, and implementation of the organization's education and research programs. It's great to have you today, Armando. It's great to see you today. The last person, certainly not least, that I'd like to introduce today is Hope Flanagan. Hope Flanagan is Mjiki Way, or Little Wind Woman from the Turtle Clan. She comes from the people of Tonawanda Seneca Reservation, and she has worked for different Native agencies, including the Division of Indian Work, the Minneapolis American Indian Center, Anishinaabe Academy, and Wachoi Nandagi Kendon. She began learning from Ogimakwe Iban about plants and plant teachings when she taught in an Ojibwe immersion classroom. She continues to learn from Ogimagwe. I did practice these, I did. Ogimagwe Gwenebik and others who pass on these teachings. Hope is the community outreach and cultural teacher at Dream of Wild Health, where she teaches Native young people about plants and their gifts. She has a teacher certification from the University of Minnesota in social studies and American Indian Eminence credentials. She also has teacher certifications in English as a second language, early childhood education, and elementary education. She has always heard that each plant has its own gift to the people, food, medicine, or utility, and that they give the gift of breath. Thank you, panelists, again for your participation in this event, and thank you all again for spending some time with us to begin talking and learning about Indigenous food sovereignty. So let's begin. So the first question that we have for the panel is, what does Indigenous food sovereignty mean to you, and how do you practice it in your life? I will invite Felicia Galvan to go first and let us know what she thinks about that.
Right. Should I wait? Is there going to be on the screen, or should I just go for it? I'll just go for it. Bujuna doing maganiduk, opachi indigunidaj, Felicia Indigenicas, Gababi ganikag, ishkunaganingnan dunjaba. Hola a todos, muchas gracias por su asistencia aquí en nuestra discusión sobre la soberanía alimentaria. So muchas gracias. Hi everybody, my name is Felicia Davon. And I am a current student at the University of Minnesota Morris, though I am also a Dream About Health Youth Garden alumna. So that's actually where I started my food sovereignty journey. So for me, being a kid in this youth program, I was probably about like 14, 15, and admittedly, I thought it was going to be like just a summer camp kind of a thing. I didn't really know much about it. It was me and my younger sister. But as we started going through the program, I was surrounded by knowledgeable people, by farmers, by elders, and cultural teachers and other kids, other youth as well. So, and we would always come together and talk about food, and we'd share lunches and this and that. And we'd be given little lectures about what does food mean. And as a youth, I thought more of it as in like, okay, like I know what this means. Food is something you eat to make yourself healthy, So that's where I kind of started my food sovereignty journey. Actually, it was just thinking, what does it mean to eat well? And I thought that meant, you know, veggies and fruits, which is still the case. But now as I've gotten a little bit older, have done a few more other, as my food sovereignty journey has progressed, I actually started realizing or thinking deeper. I'm like, okay, what does this actually mean? And what is my understanding of what Dream About Health has been doing? And as I was exploring that, I started realizing like, oh, okay, the initial concept that I had was like food is health still applies. But now I think about it more holistically, whether that be physical health, spiritual health, mental health, or emotional health. But then even as I started delving into that further, I was like, oh, this is actually a way that we as an Indigenous peoples can practice culture. Because when you think about it in a holistic sense, you know, I'm thinking specifically about farming right now, since that's where a lot of my area is. So I think about, okay, you put the food in the ground, and what does that actually mean? And how are you doing so in a way that's ensuring that you're respecting what you're growing and then acknowledging the gifts that they bring? And it's, to me, it's very cyclical thinking about between in the ground, how you prepare it, how you eat it, and what. So that's what I started really thinking about. Oh, like this is a way that as sovereignty, it can be a reclamation, or is how I've been thinking about it, against effects of colonialization, where as some of you may know, with land loss and how Indigenous peoples were affected by colonialization, we lost a lot of access to our land, and that also means our access to food. So now I'm understanding is a very powerful way to reclaim that, practice indigeneity, engage with culture, engage with community, and practice values. And how I've been doing that the last few years has been in a pretty much an academic sense. Being a college student, I've done research projects about farm equipment. I've gone to food conferences and such. Though last summer, I'm happy to say that I finally got my hands on the soil myself at Dream About Health. So to me, food sovereignty is a way of that I am identifying and showing pride that I am an Indigenous person. So yeah, I'm super excited to hear how Hope and Mandu share about their journeys as well. So thank you so much, Kateri, for introducing us. And then I'll pass it off to the next panelist.
So we'll ask Mandu the same question. What does traditional food sovereignty mean to you, and how do you practice it in your life? It's great to see you, Mandu.
Thank you. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y saludos a todos los que están participando. Gracias por participar en esto. Es muy interesante para nosotros poder compartir un poquito de nuestros conocimientos y experiencias, ¿no? Thanks everyone for being here. I'm very happy to be here, joining this wonderful group of people here to talk a little bit about sharing a little bit some of our experiences. I'm going to try to follow what Felicia was saying about how this journey in food sovereignty started for me. I think for me, it kind of started when I was a kid. You know, when I was a kid, being in Bolivia, traveling with my dad, and traveling with my family and to all these rural areas in all different parts of the country, and just trying to understand a little bit this relationship we had with our environment, but also trying to see how other people that we were visiting in different areas and stuff, how they connected with their environment. And a lot of that was the connection with the environment was reflected through their connection to food, of course, you know. And it was, to me, always fascinating to learn about it, to understand a little bit how to connect with people, with other cultures through food as well, you know, and how food is something so important that represents who we are, basically, you know, it's part of our identities and things like that. So since I was a very little kid, I had this kind of curiosity, I think, about food and trying new things and visiting other places and understanding how these other peoples in other areas besides my hometown were connecting with their environment in general. So that's kind of when I decided to study what I studied. You know, I focused my work on collaborating with Indigenous people in different parts of the world. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to be able to travel a little bit and start understanding these connections with the people, with their environment. And that's how I became an ethnobiologist, because that's what I was very curious about. But a lot of my work related to conservation, related to many different other topics, always had a very important component in food. It always brought us to discuss a little bit the idea of food and how to connect with it, how to eat, and the problems about food as well, how other foods were introduced or kind of forcibly introduced to certain areas, and people struggling with it a little bit, you know, and so all that kind of stuff made me realize that even though I wasn't thinking properly that, oh, this is what I want to study, this is what I want to focus on, food sovereignty or anything, I was really immersed in it. I was really understanding the whole idea. And so trying to think about it, to me, following the question of what does Indigenous food sovereignty mean to you, I feel like Indigenous food sovereignty refers to this idea of reconnecting to a land-based food system, you know, and a land-based food and political system for people, and highlighting a little bit the responsibilities that we have to nurture this relationship with our land, but not only with our land, but also with our culture, with the spirituality that relates around our culture, our food and everything, and also to nurture the relationship with the future generations. You know, that is also something really important, to make sure that we have a really good connection with the next generations and our environment and our culture. So everything we're doing has a purpose, but it's not a purpose right now. It's something that it will continue passing along. So the idea of Indigenous food sovereignty also relates to the I don't know how to say it, maybe the capacity, the collective capacity, I guess, of Indigenous groups in general to cultivate, to tend, to care, to produce, to distribute, and to consume their own foods, you know, to consume whatever they culturally makes more sense to them, environmentally makes more sense to them, but also acquiring other foods, other ingredients that are trusted or something from different popularity of trading and foods moving around and everything. It is a thing. It is something that it's been happening all the time. So it is part of this movement, understanding this, that incorporating, acquiring like you can say, trusted ingredients from other cultures into your own and adapt them and make them your own. It's part of what indigenous food sovereignty is, you know? And the way now to the second part, like how do I practice it in my life? It's always trying to think on this connection, you know, connection with the land, but connection with my culture, connection to my family. And I'm like really far away from them, but my family and my country, my culture in general, but I always try to maintain this connection. And I do it in many ways, by cooking, you know, by learning how to cook some stuff that are more dear to me, that bring me back to my culture, to my family. But also I brought some things. I know this is a virtual thing, but it's still, you know, I have my own Bolivian cocoa powder. I have my own Bolivian coca tea, you know, but also these are obviously store-bought things, but I also have things like this that I don't know if you can really tell, but these are some Bolivian Amazonian chili peppers that I grew here for myself because they are so important to me. I also have a dying little herb here with me that it's barely making it, but I'm really happy because it gave me some seeds, so I'll be able to regrow. So those are the things that make me feel really connected with my land, with my culture, with my community in general, you know, and that's in a way how am I practicing it, I think, in my own life, you know. And I don't want to run out of time, so I'm just going to stop there and pass it to Hope.
Thank you, Mandu. That was amazing. Hope, same question. What does Indigenous food sovereignty mean to you, and how do you practice it in your life? I think you're on mute, Hope. Hope, can you unmute, Hope? There we go.
Yes, I see. I was saying, hello, all my different kinds of relatives, fellow living beings. Nudanetsikwe Indigo, I'm known as Little Wind Woman. Hope Indigenous. In English, I'm known as Hope Mickenhacken Dudame. I'm a snapping turtle, but I'm appearing today in the form of a human. Drew Wild Health in Danoki. I work at Drew Wild Health, and this upcoming summer will be my 13th summer working at Drew Wild Health. I'm very grateful for that. I'm so grateful that to be around a group of people that have that consciousness and that awareness of food. I think my very first memory of anything, I was either 2 or 3 years old, and my mom and my sister and I would go out picking. And I remember looking up and asking my mom about wild carrots. We were picking wild carrots. And I remember on that day we were gathering the yellow water lily root too. It was Okandamu is how you say it. And later on, I've been fortunate to be around so many wonderful elders. My elder Ernie that worked with us for many years at Drew Wild Health, he would use that as a medicine. And my elder Ogimakwe Iban, she would use that as a food source. So all these foods, all of our native foods have these beautiful. I'm also blessed to be a storyteller, and in the stories they talk about every single plant has its gift of food, utility, or medicine, and every green one has its gift of breath. So when I said Nijibimadizik, my fellow living beings, is alive, that little ant that's crawling on my, it's always crawling on my floor because it really is. That's alive too. So I can't deny the life. And when I eat, it's called Mjiki Way. So you have to give an offering before you take that life. It's always been that way. And every elder I've ever talked to talked about that. I hold my hand up because in my hand, I'm pretending that there's Mitigo Sema, the red willow tobacco that I would offer as a thank you because I'm receiving a gift. So many, many, many years ago, I was told by Mjiki Way that the way to talk about it in Ojibwe is the domesticated ones, the Awakana, those are the enslaved ones, and the Awensia, the wild ones that have that wild spirit and that wild way of being. Well, we as humans made a contract with those domesticated ones. We promised that we would give them clean water, clean air, clean soil, food to eat. Now we have to think about that when we think about agriculture. Are we keeping up our end of the promise? If there's no nutrition in the soil, it can't give its gift. If it doesn't have clean water, it can't give its gift. It doesn't have a stable climate, it can't give its gift. So we have to think about how we made this contract with all the living beings, not just with humans. As a Native person, most of us know stories about how our tribes had food used against us as weapons. And when you came upon, I certainly here in Minneapolis, you heard it all the time about when Native people had enough land to sustain themselves, that more land had to be taken away, so we weren't able to be controlled. So even, just historically, we hear the story of Andrew Jackson saying it's less expensive to kill off the food sources like the buffalo than to go and shoot all the Native people. So that was an actual policy. So we want to think about that, about like, how do we reclaim that? Because we've come at a time where there's not that many wild areas left. But there are a few people that I know two elder ladies that are older than I am that still live old style and do not eat store-bought food. To me, that's the old style sovereignty. And then one of our workers at the farm, she predominantly lives on what she grows, so has very little store-bought food. The reason why I kind of single that out, store-bought food, is I'm suspicious of its origins. And we as Native people, sometimes you had to be, because you didn't know what was going to happen. Like, what kind of food are you really getting? Was there any nutrition in the soil? Was it toxified with insecticides? Was it toxified with herbicides? Was it toxified with GMO intervention? Which we've seen that over and over again with some of the food sources that we have today. So if we can teach our young ones to reclaim food sovereignty, look at where is that food coming from? Does it have a healthy spirit? Just before this, I was talking to the University of Minnesota forestry class, and we were talking about everything you take in, whether it's visually, auditorily, mentally, physically. Be conscientious about what you take into your being. Spend time with your hands in the dirt, because that's real. That's real. It's not fake, and it can't be a lie. It's not lying to you. Spend your time out in the woods. Practice listening. Practice noticing which plants are communicating with you. We're at a time right now where we see some deep dips in insect populations and bird populations. We need to pay attention to that. I know we tell the young ones at Drew Wild Health, every third bite of food that you take, you thank an insect. Because if we don't have pollinators, a third of our food is gone. So for me, this last Saturday, I do what I often do. I went in my little vehicle, and I know vehicles could be designed that aren't as toxic as the ones we have are, but they're, that's the way to get around right now. I went for the whole day just driving up to Ely to see what are food sources that I can gather, or what are food, medicine, utilitarian sources that I can gather today in the snow. And they're there. It's just we need to rethink it. I want to talk just a minute about historical ideas. I think people have misinterpreted some of the things that went on pre the time that non-natives came to this country. In this part of the world, it's only been 200 years, so it hasn't been very long at all. You'll see that in one area, like where our farm is, you'll see where people had brought their favorite foods, and you might say like hopness, like the wild potatoes, sheep potatoes, wild plums, elderberries, and wherever those old encampments were, that's where you'll find a concentration of those food plants. So that was some of the beginning agriculture. So in some of those places, you'll see where the Dakota people and the Ojibwe people, in opposition to thinking about always fighting each other, they camped together. And one group of people would rise downstream and one group of people would rise upstream. over where our Dream of Wild Health farm is. So it was a place where food brought people together. I truly believe food can bring people together again today. We have to rethink it though. One of the ways to rethink that is question, why do you have a lawn? The idea of a lawn originally was to show off that you had so much money that you didn't have to grow food. Let's rethink that. Let's think about our insects and our pollinators. Let's think about our food. How can we restore that soil and regenerate that soil to where it's healthy enough to produce healthy food? So I think we have some options here. It's just getting those creative minds together, thanking the plants, thank the insects, thank the birds, notice them, because that's one of those things that original elder I talked about who passed on her name to me. She said, you better learn the language, because in the language, you can't talk about anything that's not alive without reverence. And you have to use a verb. It's all about verbs and relationships. So she always said, learn the language because those plants are going to talk to you in the language. So learn the language, listen to those plants, spend time outside. And those are our elders, the animals and the plants. They've been here longer than us. We're the babies that are kind of foolish, and we might do ourselves in, and we might do all those other ones in too. So we have to be mindful on this journey. Miigwech Bizendawiega Kanawiya. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much for that, Hope. I feel bad that this is kind of something that we just gotta address the question and then we'll move on. But just for everybody to know too, we have had a lot of talks about how we can continue this conversation and continue the conversation about food sovereignty and also work together. So definitely keep your eyes out for anything that we might be doing in the future. With that, we'll move on to the second question for the panel today. If we could keep the answers right at about 3 to 4 minutes, that'd be awesome. If not, we can kind of adjust the time as well. But let's see, Felicia, could you talk about some challenges you have faced when practicing food sovereignty and how or what you did to overcome them?
Hi, yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this question actually, and when it really comes down to it, I think one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome was actually coming to confronting the discomfort that I have with actually, not the discomfort, but just coming to terms with like identifying as a mixed Indigenous person, and by that I mean growing up in a white suburb where I had gone to school, and I kind of knew I was like growing up, I knew I was like a little bit different, or so for me, that didn't give me a whole lot of confidence about, thinking about like, okay, I am Native, and what does that actually mean for me? So, and one of the biggest things that I had to face a lot was like, what does it actually mean to like be Native? And I always had this set idea in mind, and I knew I myself didn't match that. And since I didn't match that, I didn't feel like I was able to like participate in these kinds of conversations. So, and how I'm connecting that with Indigenous food sovereignty actually is just, having to, what am I trying to say here? Starting to explore like, what does that mean for me, and how can I feel okay with that? And how I've actually been overcoming that is surrounding myself with communities and support groups or people who support me and allow me to explore those feelings and explore like, and the first part of that was actually being at Dream of Wild Health. That was as a garden warrior. Like I mentioned earlier, I was like 15 or 16, somewhere around there. And that was the first time that I had actually kind of felt in a space where I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be around people like me, people who are making it okay that I can, learn about this stuff without feeling guilty for not having known it previously. So, one moment while I gather my thoughts here. So yeah, I'm connecting that to food sovereignty because before I was able to be comfortable with identifying as a Native person, I didn't even know food sovereignty existed, Indigenous food sovereignty even existed. So to come to terms with that was what really helped open doors to a lot of different ways I can explore. And for me, that happened to be food sovereignty and farming. And that even helps connect me to some of like my own history, especially on my dad's side of the family, who has an extensive history of being farmers. So yeah, what helped me overcome all of that was having great communities, great support groups. And now that's something that I really want to surround myself with and do for other people. I remember feeling at the farm this last summer, as I was a seasonal farmer, just seeing the current youth garden warriors there. I was like, wow, like you guys are in such a cool position. This is such a cool opportunity for you. So yeah, one of my biggest things is just having people who are there for you and make things good. So that's where I'll leave that. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicia. So we'll ask Mandu the same question. Can you talk about some challenges you have faced when practicing food sovereignty and how or what you did to overcome?
Sure. One of the main challenges I guess I faced is, in a sense, being myself. I don't know if that sounds weird, but because through my life, I've been fortunate enough to be living in different places. So I lived in, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 different countries. And within the US, I lived in about like 6 different states, I believe. So just being a migrant, it's been a challenge because I've been in different places where I couldn't find anything that it's related to my culture directly. And it's difficult, you know. I'm growing some of the stuff that I have, that I travel with them, you know, with my seeds and whatever. But like it is a complicated thing sometimes, you know, because I lived in the UK, I lived in Spain, I lived in Mexico, I lived here in the US, and it's challenging in every different environment as well. There were some places where I couldn't grow these things because the environment wasn't the appropriate one to grow my Amazonian chili peppers, for instance, you know. So one of the things that I've been doing, and also through my life, I think it's been dedicating to study a little bit, you know, but study, not, I don't mean necessarily in the formal way, but like in the way of learning about the places where I'm living currently, you know, like connect with the people, connect with the land where I'm right now, and connect with the traditional cultures that are around me, and embrace those and connect with them, you know, and learn with them, and teach them some of my own cultures and traditions as well, and share, you know, create a process in sharing. And through that, like I told you, I brought a few little things, but like as part of that, I've seen, for instance, in my most recent travels to Guatemala, I brought some cacao from Guatemala, some honey from Guatemala, you know. I have some propolis that it's a really, really nice product that this one is from Mexico, in Chiapas. I also have like some black mole from Oaxaca in Mexico, you know, the places that I live and places that I really care really deeply now, because I created a very strong relationship with the land, with the people in those areas, and also with their food. And that helped me overcome this issue of like, how can I deal with this connection that I'm missing a little bit with my land, with my own culture, if I'm living in other places, you know, and that's helping me. Now that I'm living here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, of course, I'm starting to connect. I'm working with Native Americans, and I'm starting to connect more with this wild rice. You know, I'm learning a lot more about wild rice. I'm eating it. I'm trying different varieties of corn as well that grow in this area and stuff like that. And I'm sharing some of these things, some of the products with my coworkers as well, sometimes doing cooking something, a little Bolivian something, and share with them. And then they're sharing things with me. And that's a really good way for me to start really immersing or continuing my immersion in this process of food sovereignty, you know, because even though I am a migrant, I'm moving in different areas, I'm connecting with the land, I'm connecting with the people, I'm connecting with the cultures, and I'm trying to support them through my work as well as my own experiences, you know. So I don't know if that really fully answers your question. I hope it does a little bit. And again, I'm going to try to keep it short for the time. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Mandu. Hope, same question. Could you talk about some challenges you have faced when practicing food sovereignty and how or what you did to overcome them?
I want to talk a little bit. Yes, thank you for that question. It's a broad question. I want to express some of the, the joy of it too. Part of the joy of it is like remaining open to learn. I feel like I get to learn about different things about plants every day. And if I spend time with people, if I spend time with plants, I'm going to learn something. So being willing to be open and to learn and not get stuck in my oh, I think I know all that, because I don't. I mean, plants will really keep you humble. They're always teaching you new things. I know one of those elders I talked about, she used to say, if you don't thank your elders, they're going to leave you. And then what are you going to do? And what she meant is not just the elder people, but the elder plants. So don't ever be too good to learn from your elders, whether that be the plants, the animals, all the life that's around you. One of my great things and sorrows is I feel sad when I see wild areas get decimated. You know, it's tough because it takes so long for that soil to come back. Or sometimes you just might wonder, well, how is that going to work itself out so that not all the precious native spring ephemerals will get wiped out. And so many of them are medicine plants. That's really tough. So one of the biggest problems is when you're spending a lot of time like with foraging or harvesting our old style foods, is finding places where you can collect. And because you'll get like, oh my gosh, I always tell the stories of how many times I've been stopped by people saying, what are you doing? You know, get out of here. You know, just it's a challenge. So you have to think in terms of where are Native people allowed to gather. One thing that seems to be clear to me is like on wildlife management areas, there's if everyone's allowed to hunt there, we can gather there. That's the way I interpret it. Certainly, that's one of the things I'm working with in looking at what are some of the potential areas that we can gather and how can we reclaim some of that. A couple of weekends ago, I was talking to some Pheasants Forever folks. I mean, if they have the same mission of looking at land and resource availability, or looking at how can we keep some areas clean, how can we support the life that's already there. That's one of my challenges. I know some people that think I'm a little wacky will say, Hope doesn't have a cell phone. Well, that's because at one point I kept getting stopped by people saying, what are you doing? And finally, I realized that on some of the lands where I was just looking around, I wasn't even picking it, people will follow you, or they could follow you. That's a clear thing. And now they switched over where they're following you through different ways. But yeah, sometimes that's a tough thing, is finding places where you can pick and respecting those things. So you always want to make sure you don't over harvest. You always want to make sure you have your tobacco. So don't pick if you can't say thank you. Always be thinking about that. And then be thankful for those elders that are still here and retain this knowledge. I want to say what Felicia said really reminded me about this elder I know in Canada who was giving me a recipe for mountain ash berries and smoked fish. And he said, oh, don't talk like that. They're going to think you're a bush Indian, So we get shame on all levels as Native people. Like, you're not Native enough. Oh, you're too Native because you're a bush person. It's like, you don't know your language. You didn't grow up in a teepee. I mean, nobody's Native enough. So where else, if you're so Native, like this elder I'm talking about, nobody talks to her because she speaks mostly the language, so it's really hard to have access to some of those knowledge keepers. So those are some of my challenges.
Thank you for that, Hope. Well, we got through the first two questions, and we have 10 minutes at the end here for some audience questions. I did see that we have a few of them already in the Q&A. Go ahead and put those in right now, and I will start at the top. Another thing that I will say right now is that we got about 10 minutes, so we'll try to get a couple of those answered, but I will be following up with panelists to see if we can get more of these answered in the next week or so. This will all be recorded so I can go over everything and then follow up and try to post some of those extra questions that we might not be able to get to right now through our social media. So go ahead and leave those. I apologize if we can't get to it, but I promise we will try to post and answer those on our social media in the coming weeks. So the first question that we have in the Q&A is from Kat Beyer. If it hasn't already been asked, do you all have any favorite advice to allies in training for how to support the movement? Also, any specific advice for European Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, etc., as separate groups, given the power dynamics caused by European colonization? Do white and white appearing folks have special issues they need to mind while here? And I will invite Mandu or Hope or Felicia to go ahead and let me know if they have, they'd like to answer that. Hope, Mandu.
I'll go. One of the things is we're all here for a reason. It's not an accident that we ended up here. You have a gift to give. Just like every single one of those plants has gifts, so do you. And part of it is looking in terms of how can we work together in that web of life, not like, oh, you're different from me, so I can't work with you. No, we're all looking for healing for all life. Think about life with a capital L, like life being all living beings, and we can support each other. We don't have to villainize anybody. Let's be supportive. If you go back far enough, like those really elderly elders in Canada that I'm talking about, they don't look at color, they don't look at race, they look at what are you doing in this world to help others? What are you doing in this world to honor the creator and the creation?
And I can follow up a little bit with that, and I completely agree with Hope. But also I feel like one of the things that it's something really important for all of us, that especially for some of us like myself, that we're coming from different areas, different parts of the world to the US or anywhere, it's just to be mindful and be very respectful of the traditions and the cultures that belong to the area where you're visiting now, and show interest about learning about it. You know, be humble, be yourself. Be curious at the same time, and start reaching out to people that know about the area, that know about the land, and know about the traditions, the culture. And like Hope was saying, you can bring a lot of information because you also have a lot to share, you know, and that sharing is something really beneficial for all of us, but we have to do it in a respectful way, in a way that it's cordial for everybody. And that's the way to keep moving forward, I think.
Yeah, to bounce off of those two, going off of like, you have stuff to share, I think that's super important. And then the key is doing so respectfully, because I think there's also, what am I trying to say here? Doing so in a way that doesn't overshadow voices or those who have been doing this work and having to do this work because like we talked a little bit earlier, it's reclamation. Like, we don't want to continue the acts of overshadowing, like, what am I trying to say here? Excuse me, sorry. I also think it's just important to do so respectfully without, yeah, okay, sorry, I thought I had this going, but I'm losing my thoughts. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one.
Don't worry, Felicia. It's okay. You're doing great. I'm so glad that you're here today. So the next question we have up here is, do you have any tips for us urban natives who don't always have access to outdoor spaces to grow our own foods?
Well, I think to start, you can always find a little space to grow your food. You know, you can always have a little pot You can always have a little something in which you grow certain things. You know, you have a window, you can put something, a small one. This one's a little big, but you can have smaller ones in fine ways. You know, there are different techniques, different ways to grow a garden as well, right? There are these ideas of the vertical gardens and things like that that are specific to people who live in apartments, who live in urban settings. And a lot of research has been done also about urban gardens or home gardens in a city setting in the UK, for instance. There was a very interesting studies in London and things like that. So there are ways, but also another thing that it's important, it's again, creating connections with the people on that live in your area, you know, like your friends, your coworkers. Someone might have a piece of land that might allow you to use a little space for it, you know, and start sharing this. Maybe you grow something and you can share with your neighbor or whoever it is. And those are, it might sound very simplistic ways to do it, but I think that's the way to go. We just need to connect with other people, you know, just talk to others. Like you can present your concern to your friends and to your coworkers, say like, I want to grow some things, I don't have space. Who can help me out here, you know, and we can work together. And if we put our networks together, I think there are ways to do it. Right now, I'm living in an apartment as well. I don't have the space. That's why I have my little pot. But I already contacted one of my coworkers, Kate. That I know she has a little bit of a garden, and I was asking her if I can use a little corner, at least in one of her raised beds. You know, it's creating these connections, contacting people, and in a respectful way, in a good way, and then obviously we get to share the product, you know. And I think to me that's a good kind of way to move forward in this case, you know.
I'd like to talk a little bit to that topic too. The work that Kateri's doing with the Indigenous Food Network, we're looking at different programs that are working with gardens, food, small scale farming, forming a network like that and seeing what are other people doing and how are they doing it. I know when I was working at the early childhood immersion program, we had access to a community garden. One of the things you want to do though is if you're doing that, make sure that your soil is okay. In Minneapolis, there's large areas where the soil has been so contaminated that it needs to be replaced or rebuilt. So make sure your soil is okay wherever you're planting your food. I want to lift up too an effort that Drew Wild Health is doing that I'm really proud of this. With our new land, we're looking at trying to support people who are interested in getting into the farming field. So not only are our crops that we're growing at the farm going back into the Native community, and the traditional seeds are going back to their communities, like say we're doing Ponca corn, then it needs to go back to the Ponca people. But also we're looking at being a place for people who might be interested in getting into farming. Maybe they want to start an elderberry farm. Maybe they want to start focusing on 1 or 2 crops. Then they can kind of get their feet wet through this new program that we're starting at Drew Wild Health. And to me, that's exciting because, and to me, that's another way to kind of get through that part that Armando was just talking about, that kind of like, oh, how do I connect with other people that are trying to do this work? And I know there's some people in the audience right now that have done that kind of work, that have sort of said, let's see how we can get other farmers going so they can feel comfortable about restoring land, growing food crops, growing clean food. So I know there's people from Big River Farms on right now. I know we've got our farmers from Green Wild Health, that's the focus is, don't just try to hoard anything. We try to share it so that others can pass this on and there's more nutritious food for everybody.
Thank you for that, Hope. And like I said, I'm sorry that we have not been able to get to everybody's questions today at this time, but we will definitely be following up with Mandu, Hope, and Felicia to get more of their answers. These are really great questions, and we're getting real close to the end of the hour here. So I just wanted to make sure that we stay kind of on schedule here. And I just wanted to let everyone know again, thank you for coming today. we really had a great time working together and getting to know each other for this collaboration. It's been really, really awesome to work with NATIFS. Obviously, whenever we can work together to do different things like healthy Indigenous food sovereignty, healthy Indigenous food access, and different education, things like that, if we do it together, we can amplify our message and reach more people. So we definitely appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us today. And this is just the beginning of a conversation that we hope to continue having with the Dream of Wild Health NATIFS community. And thanks again for coming today, everyone. It went by so fast. So we'll definitely be doing this again. Leave your questions, and Hope and Felicia and Mandu, if you have any last words, I'd invite you to say.
Just wanted to thank everyone for participating and for the questions. We want to try to make sure to answer all of them for sure. And also we're going to try to make sure to share our email addresses, at least certainly mine, and I'll be more than happy to continue the conversation with whoever wants to continue this, and I'm looking forward to see what else we're going to be doing in the future. Hopefully we're going to have more programming similar to this, and every time make it better, Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. My parting shot is, as climate change happens and new plants come, don't poo-poo them. They're there, they have gifts. So much of what we think of as a quote unquote weed or a plant growing where we don't want it to grow, that's food. So thank it. What I've always been told is when you thank the gifts that come, then more gifts come. So if you keep in that attitude of gratitude, I know what Armando was saying, it just really resonates with me, because sometimes if you're from a different country, a different culture, you have that food inside of your cells. Your cells sing with that food. So there's so much out there. Don't ever feel like you're limited. Keep looking at what shows up and what is flourishing. Thank you.
The last thing that I would say is just, again, thank you all for coming and for taking a listen. I hope none of you leave this feeling like, oh man, like I'm not doing enough or anything. No, this is some of it. It's just like the first step, just taking a little bit of time to learn, to listen, to ask questions. So even that in itself is really important. So I hope you all feel like something good came from this for you. So thank you so much. Also, I don't know how Mandu is planning on sharing his email, but I'd also be willing to continue conversations as well. So we'll figure that out sometime. Thank you.
And as I said, any other questions can definitely come through me, Kateri at Dream of Wild Health. Any sort of things that you want to get relayed to our panelists, definitely let me know. And with that, I will say, Doksha K1 Chiankekte, or goodbye in Dakota. It was really great for you guys all to come, and I look forward to continuing the conversation soon. Stay tuned to Dream of Wild Health social media sites and NATIFS social media sites for some updates. Thanks, everyone.